right, everybody. Welcome back to the Mulder Life Podcast. We are here at Niemeyer's Landscape Supply for a special podcast to talk about landscape design, plant design, all kinds of different stuff. And we are joined by Dana DeVries from Niemeyer's Landscape Supply and Wayne Gruber from Niemeyer's. We had Wayne on a couple weeks ago, and you can go back and listen to that podcast if you want. And we talked about his career in the green industry and how he has gotten to where he's at today. And the podcast was about an hour and a half long, and we didn't talk about a lot of stuff that I felt like we could have talked about. And so we thought it would be a good idea to do another podcast and have Dana on. Dana is, what's your official position here at Niemeyer's?
Landscape designer, but also help manage the garden center as well. Yeah.
So as far as design, she does pretty much 95% of our landscape designs or plant designs on our landscape plans. And so me and her work together a lot throughout the season. And so I thought it'd be great to have her on and tell her story a little bit. And so we'll see where this goes, and I'm looking forward to it. So thanks for being here, guys.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and big shout out to Niemeyer's Landscape Supply for sponsoring this episode, and also to Albany's Candy Factory, the official candy of the Mulder Life Podcast. So, Dana, why don't you introduce yourself, tell everybody kind of your story, your background, and how you got to, messing around with plants every day.
Sure. So, I've been kind of professionally working in this industry for about 17 years, but really my whole life I've grown up around horticulture and agriculture. So I grew up on a small family farm that my brother and I are actually fifth generation there on that farm, and my parents just kind of raised us, in a more rural, like we were out in the country. So I didn't have like a normal childhood, I don't think I would say. I spent most of my time in my summers growing a vegetable garden. So we have always had about a half-acre vegetable garden. Spent all my time outdoors with my brother working in this garden. We canned our produce, the whole thing. Our summer jobs were work in the garden, pick blueberries for a local blueberry farm, and work on my grandparents' farm cutting grass and things like that. So between my mom and my grandmas, I spent a lot of time planting flowers, working in the yard, and I guess kind of that's where my education really started. So I really worked a lot with my mom on flowers, and then as I grew up, I got involved in the 4-H program as a kid. And so from there, my brother and I both were in the garden project, and I really kind of took a liking to flowers. So I kind of started to really learn things of floral design, which is now a hobby of mine, but I think that's where it just sparked my whole, interest in this industry, and I didn't really know at the time that I could do this for a job for the rest of my life. So from there, I kind of moved on to high school, and we had a greenhouse class, actually. So we had an actual greenhouse where we would grow annuals and houseplants, things like that, and it was a fundraiser for our FFA chapter. So we would grow, sell to the staff, that kind of thing. And my FFA advisor at the time kind of knew I was becoming interested in this as possibly a career and going to college. So he really let me kind of take charge of some of the things there in the greenhouse. And so that's where I started. It was just like a little taste of production greenhouse. I got to seed, I got to maintain plants, and so I started thinking, well, this is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe this is what I'm going to major in.
It's really interesting, too, that you say you're 5 generations, and your daughter now is so excited about gardening, and that just doesn't happen.
Right.
I mean, you've instilled this interest in gardening in your daughter.
Oh, that's for sure. Yeah, she's 11, and she's also in 4-H now, too, and so she really has kind of started taking the garden project as well, and flowers, of course, with my help. And so it's kind of interesting to teach her, and she spends a lot of time there with my dad out in the yard and working in that garden. So it's basically like raising myself all over again.
Yeah. I've seen Danielle on social media. She's gardening, she's farming, she's doing a little bit of everything at a very early age.
Yeah, we definitely have a lot of similar things growing up there. She spends a lot of time also out in the tractor with my dad too, so that's kind of fun. And so just everything kind of came full circle for me. You know, I grew up with FFA, 4-H, and now here she is doing the same thing. And I think, honestly, I just give credit to, like, FFA and 4-H for really, like, introducing me to this industry and then sparking this interest in, like, okay, this is a career option for me. So, because for a while I thought, you know, growing up, I was, like, in middle school, high school, and I thought maybe I'm going to go into the dental industry. Like, I'm going to be a dental assistant. Like, that's where I'm headed, you know?
Sure.
And I think once I got into high school and I realized, like, I can't work indoors. Like, I need to be outside.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, and this is what I've done my whole life. I was outside. I was working in the yard, working in the garden. My mom would take me to the greenhouse all the time as a kid, and they would let me, you know, pick up all the spent flowers off the greenhouse floor and take them home with me, which I'm like, you know, they're probably like, great, this kid is cleaning up the greenhouse for me. And I'm over here like, this is really cool. My mom is like really excited. I'm bringing home all these like pockets full of flowers, you know? So we would pick out our plants and take them home and plant them in the yard. And that's where it started for me too, with the interest in like container design, because I do a lot of, you know, container install and annual, you know, designing, that sort of thing too. So that all kind of plays into that as well.
Yeah, that's amazing how far back it goes. The beginning, what you learn so much younger plays into what you're doing today. Is wild.
For sure.
And you have to have those mentors and those influences in your life.
100%.
So, yeah.
My parents and my grandparents honestly were very instrumental in cultivating my interest in the agriculture and the horticulture industry. My grandparents are all gone now, but my parents, you know, really raised us in this industry. So I spent a lot of time, you know, as a kid, even my earlier years, my dad was still raising, you know, pigs and things like that. So I spent a lot of time just outdoors on the farm. And I just have just continued that in my life. I just can't imagine being stuck in an office. And this was definitely what I was born to do. So
yeah. And now you sit in front of a computer designer.
I do. Yeah, here I am.
It's exactly what you dreamed of.
Yes. You know, there's a lot of times where I'm designing and I'm stuck, you know, in the office and I'm like, okay, I have to go for a walk in the yard.
Right.
Like, I need to think about my plant palette. Got to go walk around the garden center and see what's going on. So
it's good you get enough interruptions in the garden center that force you outside.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, and that's really, I mean, I would imagine the best of both worlds a little bit.
Oh, yeah,
I mean, you have the ability to, in your position now, is to be designing and then be able to walk outside and look at something that you're thinking about using potentially or whatever. So
yeah, that's honestly a really big perk for doing design work, because I can look out my office window and be like, which perennials are looking good today?
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Like what's really like sparking my creativity, and I can literally just look out the window and see stuff. And so that's really cool. And I think, you know, I went through high school thinking like I wasn't sure at the beginning, but by the end of my high school career, I knew that this was it for me. And that's when I applied at Purdue University, and I headed that direction. So I spent 4 years at Purdue. I majored in, I started my major in horticulture production and marketing, because I thought, you know, this is where I'm heading. I'm going to grow stuff.
Okay.
So I think what changed my mind was my first summer out of college. I worked for a production greenhouse near my house. I worked 12 to 14 hours a day for 6 days a week, and I just watered plants, and I learned how to apply fertilizer, scout for insects and disease problems, all that. And I spent a lot of time in that greenhouse thinking about things. And I'm like, I don't really know if this is for me.
Wow.
Like, I definitely appreciate growing, and I love that experience because I know so much more about the production industry. But that's when I really knew that I think I'm heading in more of a design direction. So
wow. What a great opportunity to find that out early.
Well, and anyone that's honestly in this industry, and if you do go to college, I think that you need to spend every summer working in a different facet of this industry. That's what I did. And that's when I figured out like what direction I really wanted to head and get more specific in it. But definitely appreciate that experience, but that's not something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I like to grow stuff, but I just don't want to do it for 14 hours a day all summer long. So I spend that many hours a day doing landscape design now. So.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so those 4 years were great. I worked in another summer at another garden center, and then by the time I reached, I think, my junior year at Purdue, I got really involved in the horticulture society while I was there, and that was cool. Lots of experience and a lot of like networking of people I still talk to today. But that summer, we do like a fundraiser, and people from all over the state, alumni, that sort of thing, donate plants. And we build this like garden, and we sell everything.
Okay.
So I volunteered to pick up, donations here in Northwest Indiana, and so I showed up at this garden center, and there's this guy named Wayne.
Wow.
And he's given us some donations, and while I'm there, he's like, you need a job this summer, and I'm like, I wasn't, didn't really necessarily love the garden center job I had the summer before. Maybe this would be a good opportunity. It's close to home, so I took the job. And
no way. That's how you guys met?
Yeah, I almost totally forgot that she came first for the donation for the horticulture show. And ironically, I ran the horticulture show quite a few years prior to that.
Okay.
When I was in college, I actually was in charge of the horticulture show, and I know how difficult that is to put that show together, and you need to be getting all these donations and things like that. So I was hoping, at least from memory, hopefully I was fairly generous with the donation.
I'm pretty sure you were. I think I brought a truck to pick it up, so I think it was good.
I think so. Now that you say that, I do remember that. So that was good.
Yeah. So little did I know that was the offer of a lifetime for me. I took this summer job. I went back and finished up my rest of my school year.
So that was between your junior and senior year? Okay.
Yep. And so at that time, everyone's starting to think like, okay, I need to start looking for a job. Like,
right.
I'm about to go into my last year in college. Like, I need to
be productive.
Figure this out. I need to do this, So I'm like, well, we'll see where this job goes. This is cool. I had no idea what it was going to be like. I took the job. I showed up. I started watering plants. And then Wayne kind of started, working with me on some stuff. Like, I started learning. And I hadn't experienced that before. So that was definitely like a life-changing moment for me.
Yeah.
It turned into more of like not just a job, but more of an internship or more of like a mentorship. And so I learned a lot that summer, so much about plants and just stuff about design and industry. And I went back for my senior year, and all of my like colleagues were just like, wow, like, how do you know so much? Like, in one summer, you just learned so much. And I'm like, I don't know. I just did it all summer. And this guy, he taught me, and here I was finishing up my senior year, and, he had offered me a full-time position for when I graduated. So I'm like, yes, like, let's do this.
Yeah.
So, 17 years ago, that was 17 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's so great, when you have this young mind and this open mind that is willing to learn, we're full of a lot of knowledge, especially as we go through all these years of experience. And you can talk about it, you can try to tell people about it, but if there's never the sponge that takes it all in, and that was Dana. I mean, she was enthusiastic and she was passionate, and to find someone, you and I talked about that in the last podcast, just about how it's not really work, it's a passion. We enjoy what we do. We're very blessed to do this, and to find somebody like that is just
and you knew it right away.
I did.
You're like, she needs to work for me.
She does need to work for me.
Right.
Yeah. And it's the stars were aligned.
Well,
apparently.
because you already knew that you wanted to do this for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
You found out early enough which part of it you wanted to do right away, and then you meet someone that is able to help further. Right. I mean, would you say that the amount of just in the first summer, the amount of education you learned just from that is like 4 years of college, probably?
100%.
Right.
I'm definitely more of a hands-on learner too, but in this industry, I think that you can't learn things from sitting in a classroom. Like, it's cool to get the background and to know like the technical parts of the industry and learning your plants, that's important, but to actually go out in the field and do it. Yeah. Like, I was out with the crew installing landscapes. I was doing small landscape designs in the garden center for customers, and he was just like, it was like doing homework. I would like design it. He would look at it and he would tell me like, no, this is bad. Like, you have to do, this or that. Yeah. And I'm like really open to that criticism, and then I started, just looking at his design work and just seeing like how he was doing things, and I really started picking up and like kind of running with that. So.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, it's just to find that at all the series of events is really incredible.
The nice basis for it, too, is that we both had the same education.
Oh, yeah.
And you make a good point. I mean, the education is super valuable, but it's just the starting point.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well,
And-
I mean, you leave college thinking that, man, I spent 4 years in college. I know so much.
Yeah, you know everything.
And then literally the first thing that I learned when I left college was I don't know anything. I mean, I knew stuff, but about this industry and like running a garden center and running a landscape crew. They don't teach you those things in college. Like I knew a lot of Latin names. I knew a lot of plants. Like great, but you have to learn so much more to excel, in the industry and design too. Like you spend a lot of time designing like hypothetical projects, but to actually go out into the field and like do a site visit and see these real life problems and like learning how to design around them, that's a whole nother, experience. So,
And that was how far into Gardens on the Prairie were you before you hired her?
That we were pretty young.
well, yeah, it was 2006.
About 5 years
Yeah,
into it, maybe.
Because I
Okay.
think I was
Maybe
there for
about-
your 5th year.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
Gotcha.
in that summer.
And the cool and fun thing about this is that, here we've got this young, energetic person in. I'm, of course, older at the time, but it is my new venture. So everyone's excited.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to figure out, we're basically, forming how this garden center is going to be.
Right.
And to have an open mind and someone willing to listen as well as offer ideas and, willing to say, one thing about our industry, you have to be able to handle rejection too,
Oh,
as we
100%.
all
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Oh,
And, we say, no, that's not a good idea, or that is an amazing idea. So we ran with things that we had no idea we were capable of doing because, again, that synergy that we've talked about is incredible. So when you get those young minds with a lot of creative ideas fresh out of school, it's like, yeah, we can do this.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't know the whole story.
Yeah.
That's really great.
So I spent 8 years working with Wayne at his own business. So that was like an invaluable experience. I learned, I was there for part of the process of building that garden center, but just seeing like how it runs and how it was being built and just learning about like even the business side of things. Like that was really cool. I think it's neat to understand like how the business runs and the numbers and all that, because it really, if you're helping run that business, it makes sense to know like what's going on behind the scenes.
So you hired her as what was, just at the time a laborer or a right-hand person?
No,
or like,
as
how
a
does
right-hand
it-
person,
okay.
as a landscape
Okay.
designer, as a professional, as
So-
a landscape designer.
So quickly,
to-
you two were very close working together.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And then, she's bringing these talents, so the business is evolving. So now we're starting to offer events. We're offering container classes. We're doing things. We're growing gardens. We're doing a potager garden, which is a like mid-century, vegetable and soup
garden.
kitchen,
Yeah.
soup garden. We have an outdoor kitchen. We're doing outdoor. We're doing cooking classes, cooking demonstrations. We're having weddings at the nursery. We're, have these incredible events.
Yeah.
We had up to a couple hundred people at a few events that we're doing talks and lectures, and offering the garden center part of it and the plant learning and things like this. At the same time, we're also doing design build.
Wow.
So
much experience.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
Literally
it's-
every part of this, that part of the industry I was learning, like from the design build all the way to running the retail garden center. And that retail garden center was not like a normal retail garden center. So we had all the display gardens and people were coming in just to see that,
We had tour buses coming
We
in
did.
from
We had
Oh,
tour
wow.
Chicago
buses.
and things like that. Some of the garden clubs in Illinois.
Yeah.
It was really cool. But to have a partner kind of in this and working with this with creative and new ideas, it was just phenomenal. I was in my early 40s at the time, so that's like an IV practically of new blood and information and creativity. So we
Yeah.
have to be open-minded not only at the
Right.
age of 20 but also at the age of 40
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
at 60.
That's right. There's-
Yeah.
You can always be learning something.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, when I was there, that's when we started doing our first workshop. So I kind of like helped develop that whole like porch pot workshop for the Christmas season. We started with just like this idea of like, okay, let's teach our customers how to do this. You know, we were selling all of this stuff and we were making things for sale, but like, let's teach them how to do this. And so I kind of ran with that, started these workshops. We were doing a lot of workshops, like porch pot. We were making centerpieces. We were doing like these kissing ball things. There was a lot of different projects they could come there and do. And that just started like building over time. And then eventually, you know, we made the move here to Niemeyer's. So I was with Wayne for about 8 years there at his business. And then in 2014, we moved here to Niemeyer's and we started the garden center thing all over again. So we built the garden center from scratch all over again. And I was still doing some of those workshops too, but man, that whole Christmas season kind of took off, and that's been a big deal here for us in the garden center. But yeah, so once we moved here, I think we kind of stopped doing design build, but I was really involved in the retail garden center. And then I really started like developing more on, and I feel like maturing more in my design. And then starting to work with a lot of different contractors here and working on planting design, like what I do with you. But getting to experience projects from several different companies and just working in a lot of different, like situations from commercial to, you know, residential has been just such a cool experience here. And I really feel like I've changed and kind of like, you know, developed over time with design. And so it's really been kind of an interesting like journey here.
I think possibly what we thought in the beginning, we'd miss the design build like that for our own firm. And we very quickly, within a year's time, the agreement was that we didn't do design build because it would compete with our customer.
Right.
And our customer was about 100 different contractors that were doing business with Niemeyer's. And as Dana says, it just opened up a brand new world, because the cool thing was that everyone does things a little differently and does different size projects. So now we suddenly can influence, or, you know, at least have, you know, some sort of contribution to 100 different landscapers.
Yeah.
So
which are all performing multiple jobs at a time, some of them.
Yeah.
And then
at
you're
all different levels.
And you're also constantly teaching at the same time.
And again, all different educational levels. You have those that know a lot about plant material and know something about design, and you have many of them that don't, that are just brand new into the industry.
Wow.
So, you know, amazing possibilities this opened up.
And going along with that too, the education part, that was something that was really cool. Like when I started working with Wayne, you know, we started traveling. Like he always traveled. And I'm like, this is really cool. Like we would go to trade shows, and we don't just go to a trade show. We will stop at a garden center or a public garden or some kind of cool place on the way there and back. And so then I started really like thinking like, okay, this is cool. Like you get your inspiration from everywhere. You're not just stuck in Northwest Indiana, like stagnant, but we go out and we see things all the time, and we're always learning. And it never stops. You never stop learning, and especially in this industry, things change so quickly. And I think that's been so cool to just, you know, kind of go along and be together when we go on these trips, because you kind of play off of each other. You see things and you get ideas and you just kind of run with it. So
yeah, absolutely.
You know, Andy, we play games like when we go on a trip, it's like who can come up with the Latin name first?
Yeah.
Who can identify the plant
what
first?
A riveting trip.
That's some true plant.
Sign me up.
We don't have, especially me, doesn't have much of a social life. So to me, this is like, hey, this is so cool. And be able to speak this language with somebody. And it doesn't matter where you are, you know.
No.
You just came from a nice, warm, sunny spot. I was just in a nice, warm, sunny spot. There's ideas.
Yeah.
You know, everywhere you go,
100%.
you see combinations, you see cool plants. You know, I was in a tropical environment, but we use a ton of tropical plants. You know, give the container woman here some interesting tropical plants to use, and you should see how the creativity explodes.
Yeah.
So fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, traveling is so important, and getting ideas from all over the place is incredible. And, you know, that in design is so crucial.
Absolutely. I even found, like, when we go to if we go to resorts or different places, usually their outdoor spaces are incredible.
They are.
And so you can really glean a lot from their design layout and how something would look, or either it's super modern or what. I mean, even foyers of places are always like built out with different things.
Right.
And, sometimes I'm not even purposely looking. I'm just like, oh, that's really cool. And then you just think of that maybe potentially on a job. You're like, that one time I saw that really cool sitting area, and we could probably incorporate that here or
Right.
whatever, So.
Yeah, it could be a line, a texture,
Right.
color. It could be a hard goods material.
That's right.
Absolutely.
There's so much to be learned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool, Dana. What a really cool journey for you and Wayne, and how you've gotten.
Yeah.
What a blessing to find something that you loved so early in life. That's very rare. I believe I had the similar experience in my life, and I don't know how to replicate that for my children.
Right.
I hope that it's the case.
I hear you.
Because you also see people that struggle with that their whole life, and
I
don't know how to. I don't have the golden answer. It just happened.
It did. It just happened. Like, I feel like this is what I was born to do, and I went and ran with it.
Yeah.
And I didn't have many distractions along the way. Like, always supported by my family and just everyone around me. This was my goal, and that's what I'm working towards, and here I am. So.
Yeah.
I think Dana made a few financial sacrifices too, because she could have gone to work for a big company.
Right.
She didn't have to work for my small company at the time, and we didn't have benefits. We didn't pay super high wages.
Yeah.
We couldn't. We were a young company, so she's kind of sacrificed that financial part to follow her passion and do something she loved. And then, of course, when the Niemeyer opportunity came, then I always believe, like, if you do what you love, then eventually things will happen.
Yeah, we talked about that before.
Yeah.
And she's the case. When we were going to make this move, she's one of the first people I went to and said, "Are you comfortable with this?"
Mm-hmm.
And I think this will help on the financial end. And you already like what you do, passionately. But we have this opportunity to grow and build a brand new garden center at just an incredible fast rate.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. But
It's been a wild ride.
so there's sacrifices along the way. You know it.
100%.
Everyone has to realize that it's not just handed to you on a golden platter.
That's right. And I've heard Mike Rowe talk about finding your passion or finding a career, and how to people just go to school and think like whatever they go to school for, they're just going to love to do, and that's not always the case. And he makes the argument about going to try something that you like to do first before even going to college, before you even decide you may want to go to college or whatever. And I think that is not taught very much in our school system, is that's an option as well.
Oh, I agree.
And I mean, obviously you were doing something that you loved enough to know you were headed the right path.
Right.
But even then, after you started, you then were able to specialize or go a slightly different way in the same direction.
Exactly.
But
that came with trying it out.
That's right.
I got experiences from getting a job doing that, and without kind of like really little to lose at that time of my life. I'm young, I still live at home, but I had a taste of it in high school through FFA, and then I was doing this kind of thing in 4-H, and then I started working in the industry, and that's where I really fine-tuned the direction I was headed. But if I wouldn't have taken advantage of those experiences and went on and done that, I could be in a job right now that I totally hate,
That's right. You could be cleaning teeth.
I could be.
That's right.
That would have never lasted for me.
Right.
That's pretty funny.
That's really great. I appreciate you telling all of the listeners all that your story, and that's really great. We thought we would also then kind of transition to planting design and common problems, plants, however we want to go through about this, but just talk about, really dig a little deeper into what you guys are doing, what we're doing as landscapers, common problems that you're seeing. And because you have the unique opportunity to work with landscapers of all skill levels, I think you have a very unique perspective on what you're seeing. You have the ability to see so much more than I think the typical garden center is even seeing, because I would say that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you are not doing any designing or layouts or all you're doing is selling, you're just selling.
Right.
And I think that's what why it's so great to have an opportunity to speak with people that are your involved from the beginning, from the site, sometimes probably going to the site to literally measure. You do some of that, to the design process, to the selling part of it, and then literally to the install. And then you also have the retail side of it, which is very telling. And we talked about this a little bit before preparing, and there's some really interesting things that we can talk about that you've noticed even through the COVID years, and things that you've noticed just coming out of just people being at home. And so we thought we would let them kind of talk through. They made an outline of different things that we could talk about. And so why don't you guys, talk about, we can start with planting designs or different common problems that you have been seeing in the industry, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think one of the fundamental things, first of all, is that people have to get in their mind that it is important to plan.
Yes.
Would you not agree with that?
I 100% agree.
Because when you just go to shop in a garden center, start picking things out, and then take them home and say, now what do I do with this stuff? There's not a lot of purpose to that. So I think planning's super important. Dana, what do you feel like some of the reasons for planning would be?
Well, definitely, you just want to set yourself up for success. So if you have a plan, I mean, if with anything in life, you have a plan and you show up at the garden center and you have an idea of what you're doing, or you're planning and you're selling to your client, you have to have an idea of what's happening. There's so many things that go into planting design, especially, and so many things to think about with the selection and the decisions that go into that.
How often are you seeing, from the contractor standpoint, how often are you seeing where someone comes to you and says, this is a picture of the house, and I have no, do you have a lot of people coming to you with zero plan, or how are you?
I'd say that's mostly the case.
Yeah, I would say probably about 95% of the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, no idea what they want.
No idea. Well, planting design, if you don't have a plant knowledge, is confusing and it's overwhelming, and
Yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah.
And you start to question them, and it's so important to ask questions and to listen to what the client. You go through this on the contracting side.
Yep.
The first meeting with that client, you want to know, what do they need, what do they like, what do they want, what problems do you see on the site, things like this. So there are so many fundamental things that you first need to get out, and then you start to ask them, areas of interest. I mean, look at some of the projects and some of the interesting hardscapes that you're dealing with now.
Yep.
Fireplaces and water features, and the last water feature you did was like on a grand scale,
Right.
From streams to ponds to fountains.
Right.
Lighting, outdoor sound and music. You've done some incredible outdoor kitchens.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
these possibilities. So depending on where this customer is at and where they want to go to.
Right.
And that's another important thing that I didn't actually put in the notes. We were taught in college that plan for what you ultimately want.
Right.
And then you can phase it.
You can.
You put it into, this is not something, to me, in my mind, a landscaping is never completed.
Yeah.
It goes through
It
your
evolves.
entire life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it evolves. But you go with this first phase, then you go with the second phase, then you have the outdoor kitchen, and then you throw in the pool, and then you do another garden.
Right.
So over the course of your lifetime, you have developed your landscape.
Yeah, and I think that how you look at a landscape or we look at a landscape is very different than what a lot of clients look at a landscape. They typically will look at a landscape and say, I want to put this landscape in, and I want it to sit there and look how it looks by itself for the, it's not constantly evolving. Sometimes
Right.
you're going to have customers that want to do that.
Sure.
So there's you have to identify your correct client and what their skill level is, what their desire is, and set realistic expectations for your client. I think that's a common problem, is not providing realistic expectations. Would you agree?
I agree.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a very good point, that if the customer has the resources and wants to install it all 5 phases at the same time, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But they still, as time evolves, within 5 years or 7 years, they're going to be on the phone calling you because there's
100%.
still going to be changes.
Right.
Because a landscape is not static.
Right.
It's
living things.
It is living
yeah.
things.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the cool part about it. But
And even from a planting design standpoint, that's a common problem. I would say is designing something that you're not planning for the future. Like you're putting it in and it looks awesome this year, maybe next year, maybe the year after.
Right.
But then you planted things too close, and in 5 years, your beautiful emerald green arborvitae is hitting your gutters and rubbing against your siding because you thought it was really cute.
Sure.
And I just think that's again a common problem in the design stage, and things that I see when we're going to re-landscape something or whatever is no one thinks about down the road. And some of that stems from the people installing have no idea what they're doing.
Sure.
And which is an education problem.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah. And this is all part of the process.
Yeah.
So, the beginning of the process starts with that interview and so forth. And the reason for planning is so that mistakes can be corrected and we can go into certain things. There's actually a series of steps that we kind of go through. And that starts with kind of the client's goals and objectives.
Right.
And continues.
Well, yeah, the whole design process. So sometimes we do go out on a landscape site, or a lot of times, like you'll send me a plat or you'll start a project, in scale. But we kind of go through an inventory and analysis period where we think about like what's going on with this site and like all the different things that will affect, not even just the design itself, but the plants and, the thing as a whole. So,
Right. Direction of where it faces and
right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
You have to decide on, are there a lot of large trees on the site? Is there going to be shade, sun? Are you going to affect the trees with a patio, the root systems and so forth?
And like even drainage,
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And the type of soil, like if we're working up near the lake and it's sandy versus here where it's clay, like that's going to change things too,
Right.
Yeah, and that's all part of that inventory and analysis thing. You actually look at what exists and then you analyze what should be done with it.
Right.
And from there we kind of go on to like spatial layouts, what they call a COB, which is kind of this interesting thing. It's circulation, open space, and bed mass.
Yes.
And we have a similar instructor. Greg Pearsall was very instrumental in both of our lives with design. I mean, he was just... I think I went into college and I didn't know how to read a scale, which was weird. It's just like I'd never been taught how to read a scale and to make a scale drawing. And I had a professor or two say, "You don't belong here." And Greg Pearsall happened to mention to me, he says, "You definitely belong here.
Yeah.
You're passionate. You want to be here. Let me teach you those basic skills."
He was what did he do?
He was a landscape architect.
Okay.
So he was a professor at Purdue. And we both had him actually during our time at Purdue.
But he wasn't your professor at the time when he told you this?
Yeah.
He was my professor
Oh, he
at the
was.
time.
Okay.
He was a young professor at the time.
Okay.
And, just going against the grain a little bit, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, he was not your traditional, the professor comes in and lectures to you. He comes and works with you. He's coaches you, basically. And for me, this was like, okay, this is cool. I can do this.
Yeah.
And it's because of some influences like that it is what I do today. Yes. Otherwise, I would have gone into psychology, like we had said. I would have been Wayne's psychiatrist trying to analyze myself, like, why didn't I do this?
Right. Right.
Uh-huh.
But his concept was the circulation, open space, bed mass, that, these objects take a certain amount of the space. And this is a fundamental process that we go through with design. And from there, we kind of go into this conceptual plan.
Right. So we just work on, conceptualizing basically the project. And it's not like in the beginning, you're not thinking about specific plants, but you're thinking about like, how is this whole thing going to be organized? What do the beds look like? Where do the canopy trees need to go? And you're just kind of like getting a general feel for like what this site needs and how it's going to flow.
Yeah. And that's, once that conceptual plan is done, then you kind of meet back with the contractor. And you and Dana have done this. You know that on a personal level here because you came to us with your client's needs, likes, and wants. You conveyed that to Dana.
Right.
Dana basically did this. Okay, this is where we're circulating. These are the open spaces. This is the bed mass. Roughly puts in some circles for the idea where the plants will go, meets back with you. You meet back with the client and say, are we on track?
Yep.
So this way we haven't spent 40 hours on something that they're just totally, not on board with. And then you guys meet with the client and you finalize that plan.
Right.
Yeah, and some of that stuff can be, sometimes it's more streamlined depending on the client.
Absolutely.
I've had some clients that want to be super involved in the layout or the selection of the plant material. I've had some clients that don't know anything of what I'm putting in, nor I don't think they ever look. They just want to see how it looks like when I put it in. Sometimes that can be a problem if they're very uninvolved, because we'll go to install and then they're like, oh no, I don't really like that plant. And so then you're doing some on-site changes, and that's real world stuff that, the client has an idea of what something's going to look like and it's not what they thought. And so then you have to work through that.
A lot of psychology. You
have to, you're very quickly learning how people work and who makes the decisions and how much they care about those decisions. And, it's a people business.
It is.
All business comes down to that. But people, you'll learn, those of you listening that do this, and if you're just starting out, you'll learn that every single, there's like 4 different kinds of people. I feel like, I don't know if I could name off them, but I feel like every time I'm at a job, like within 5 minutes, I know who cares a lot. I know who can visualize, and I know who can't visualize. And I know, how picky they're going to be. I can tell that very quickly now, meeting with more people, and you learn that in plant design, I feel like, quickly.
Yes.
Yeah. And this is important for you to listen to that client and to be able to try to figure that client out.
Yes.
It's a little different than, going to a store and picking out clothes, not liking them and returning them. You guys are bringing all the material out here, which is, big material, bulky material. Then you're putting it in the ground, and then if the result is they want to make changes, it's costly.
Yeah.
If it hasn't met their expectations.
And that's why a design is so important, not only just to have the design, but then also to have a to-scale design is ultra important.
I agree.
And I think that is probably missed, I would imagine, in some contractors' worlds, is not working in scale and thinking about the future and those kinds of things. So.
It's important for you, too, because you're the type of person that not only when you present that plan, you have to be knowledgeable about what's on that plan.
Yes.
You can't just say, here's the pretty picture.
Sometimes you can, depending on the client.
Yeah, it depends on how specific they want to
do
get.
you like all the pretty colored circles? That's what it's going to look like.
You want the confidence.
That's
you want them to know that, when it's done, it has met the expectation.
And also, I would like to say that it's important to remember that you don't have to know everything. If you're working, in my case, I'm going to speak from experience. I work with Dana and you because you know so much more about this with plants and everything. You know so much more than I do. And I have no problem admitting that, because I don't have the capacity to know everything that you know. Nor do I need to know everything, because we're partnering together. And so there's been many times where you've come with me to client meetings when I know the client is someone that is much more involved in the plant layout and design and is going to have questions that I may not know all the answers to, which is fine to tell your client that you don't know or I can get back to you. But in our case, I'll have Dana come with me to meetings, and so that I can make sure that the client's questions are answered accurately, and I'm not either just guessing, which I shouldn't do, nor should anybody do. And I can give them an answer when they are right there.
Right.
And so I used to try and do a lot of this stuff myself, but as we've grown as a company, I've decided, instead of me trying to be everything to everybody, it's better to find people that can come alongside me and help us grow without, I don't need to do everything. I don't need to be the best. I want to work with the best people, and I think that's the best way to grow my business. And so that's how our relationship has developed, and that's I'm assuming that can be, other people can do that stuff. But I think it's just important for people listening to, if you don't know everything, like I didn't go to college for this.
Right.
I've just learned, as I've gone, and then you guys have taught me a lot, and I'm always learning just from the design process. When we're just working together, I'm still learning. But again, it's okay that you don't know everything, and find people that can help you. And they can know
Yeah.
everything.
And don't sell yourself short either. Your expertise, man, your expertise is in areas that we can't even fathom.
Right, but
it's just
that's
our expertise is in plants.
That's right. And so
Right.
that's why I do what I do
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
you guys, is because I don't have the capacity to know.
Sure.
I don't need to know everything.
When we were in the design build part of the industry, it's we could do a small patio or a walkway, but in terms of some of the massive projects and incredible work that your company has done, I can't even fathom that. So, again, that partnership,
That's right.
we would have to partnership that synergy it's incredible
That's
to,
right.
to do that. But you're right. You know your strengths, you know your weaknesses, and they can all kind of be strengths if you partner with the right people.
That's right. 100%.
Which is great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, from there, from our design process itself, if we talk specifically just a little bit about planting design itself, let's go into just a couple things about planting design. And we always want to review those goals and objectives. As you said, Andy, every client is a little different. Some just want like low maintenance. Some want to just drive up and say it looks beautiful.
Everyone wants low maintenance.
Yeah.
And
Every
then
They're always like,
person you see.
they're like,
Yeah.
so I'm thinking low maintenance. Wow, really?
I
shocking.
honestly, and I haven't been in this industry as long as like Wayne has, but the whole time I've been in this industry, not one customer has ever come to me and said, I want a higher maintenance landscape.
I want
at my
something
house.
that is a lot of work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no one. Nobody says that.
like, goes to that understanding. I mean, it's like every living thing takes maintenance.
Yeah.
Goodness sakes, you got to eat breakfast in the morning. Well, you don't have to eat breakfast, but you have to feed yourself. You have to
Yeah.
dress yourself. You have to get a haircut once in a while. So, these are living things we're dealing with when it comes to the planting material aspect of
Yeah.
it. And so that is, and probably we discussed, this is probably one of the first questions to ask in the design process. What kind of inputs do you want to put into this? How much maintenance do you want to be involved? And you're correct. 9 out of 10 times we want low maintenance.
Right.
So you have to design with that in mind.
Or
Right.
determining whether they are planning to hire you to maintain it for them
Yeah.
after the install, because then that changes things too, because, kind of opens the door for maybe a few more plant options if they're paying someone to maintain it for them.
Right.
Yeah, because your skill set's going to be much better. Well, I shouldn't say always, but it could be at a higher level than the client, and therefore you understand these plants, you understand what they should do. So if you're going to maintain it, yeah, different story. When we talk about and we'll run into just a few mistakes here as well too, but I think in that design process, the client is picking out things. Boy, it's endless between Instagram and YouTube and Pinterest, right? They're seeing all kinds of examples. I think the one that we saw a few years ago was the pink and the blue hosta leaves.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I honestly think maybe I saw that on Pinterest, but a customer physically came in with their phone and had a picture of this hot pink hosta, and it was like a neon kind of blue and green hosta, and they're like, I want to get these. Like, I don't want to have to order the seeds online, but I want to see if you can get them for me. And I just looked at them, and I'm like, okay.
And then you showed me the picture because that was the first time we'd seen it.
Like,
and it's like, have you ever seen anything that looks like this? It's like, no, this does not
It was
exist.
for sure photoshopped, but they had no idea. They thought that was reality, and they came to buy it. They wanted that.
And they thought they could buy the seeds to do that.
Yeah.
Well, and that's what they were selling was the seeds
Yes.
because no one's ever seen one of these plants in real life. So if you're selling a seed with the promise of this plant eventually coming out.
Yeah, I think we actually I was like, well, where did the picture come from? And they clicked on the link, and it took them to a website where you could buy the seeds for it. And I was like, okay, I would really like to order these seeds and find out like what this is,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Not-
to find, but we know
Not real.
factually that they're not going to be pink or blue,
Right.
Which is what it was. So yeah,
So you're constantly killing people's
dreams and
They're just
visions.
literally it's like, I'm sorry,
We're
Mrs.
smashing them,
This is
man.
this is where it ends.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith.
It's like,
you cannot
or
do
they've
that.
just been somewhere nice and warm and say, hey, can I, grow palm trees?
Yeah.
And my answer is yes, you can grow
Yeah.
palm trees in Northwest Indiana, but we're going to treat them as a container. So here's how, and you're going to grow them for 3 months here.
Right.
That's what you're going to do.
Right.
Well, when they say they want them to grow year round, it's like, well, bring them in the house, whatever, but they're not going to make it through the winter.
Right.
And that leads us kind of to some of the existing environmental conditions. I mean, every plant has a certain set of requirements. There's a science behind planting. And planting, there's sun, there's shade, there's part shade, typically defined, and a lot of people just don't even know what does full sun mean. And we typically define that as 6 hours or more of full sunlight.
Right.
And 2 to 6 hours is part shade, and shade is 2 hours or less of direct sunlight. So typically, as your house faces, your north side is more of a shade, the east side is more part sun, and your west or your south are full sun. Now, a lot of variables. If there's existing trees, things like that, obviously those light conditions change. But not only light, I mean, we got soil, different soil types. I mean, Northwest Indiana, you've worked on sites anywhere from sand to clay.
It is wild, the different soils in this area.
Yes.
And
It's
I
insane.
often have people asking me on social media, like we've literally, you can drive 20 minutes south and it's straight sand.
Yeah.
You can be in hard clay and drive 20 minutes north and it's black dirt. It's just wild, the difference. It's not always the same thing around us.
Right.
And it's crazy that, I mean, this is super unique from a landscaping standpoint and a design standpoint, because you could work with 5 different contractors and have 3 or 4 different types of soils.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
That's one of my first questions, honestly, whenever I start
You
working
could
on a
almost
new
ask, like,
project.
what town is it in? And then you almost
That's
know.
what I ask
We do.
first is like, what town?
Right.
Even with the retail customers, when they come in and they say, oh, I'm looking for some new plants. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, like, where do you live? And they sometimes are like, what do you mean?
Right.
And
Like,
well,
I'm not going
just-
to tell you my address.
I'm like, do you live in Crown Point? Like, where
Right.
do you live in Northwest Indiana? And so, and I say, okay, so do you have this type of soil? Because a lot of times they don't know.
Yeah.
They have no idea. They're like,
Yeah,
well,
it's funny that
they're
they-
like, well, it's
Yeah.
black dirt. That's what I have. And I'm like, okay.
Right. No, most likely not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you live in Crown Point, you have clay, and they're
Yeah.
like, no, it's black dirt. And I'm like, okay.
And
Right.
you sometimes even ask them, have you ever dug a hole? Well, no, not really.
Right.
So,
Right.
So-
well, tell us where you are, and we'll
Right.
give you a pretty good idea.
And that goes for us landscapers, as you need to be finding out those things too.
Yes.
So-
yes,
For sure.
contractors need to know that. I mean, that's one of the first
And if the
questions.
client doesn't know, or if you don't know where you're at and what's going to be there, just dig a hole.
Yeah.
Find
Yeah.
somewhere to
That's
dig.
the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to.
And we try to pick material that's adapted to multiple types of soil, but some plants are going to perform better in the sand versus the clay, versus an acidic soil, versus a basic soil.
Right.
That's those are super important questions
Yeah.
for planting design. Hardiness zone is another thing. And hardiness zone, we are zone 5. And the way hardiness zone works, it is the minimum cold temperature that a plant can tolerate in the winter. Now, this doesn't have anything to do with wind chill. So minus 60 below is no big deal to most plants. To some of our broadleaf evergreens, that's a little different case. But the temperature on the thermometer is really what goes by for hardiness zone. So our zone 5 says that we can go down to minus 20. So the plants we try to choose in our area to sell are zone 5, 4, 3, or 2. Because as the numbers get less, the temperature, they can tolerate lower temperatures. We go to minus 30, minus 40 as the numbers go down. As the numbers go up, they're less tolerant to those cold temperatures. So zone 6 is more like minus 10, zone 7 is 0. So as we get down to Florida, where it's zone 9 and 10, where it's about 20 degrees, the plants can't tolerate getting through the winter, won't survive the winter with those temperatures. So even though, like plant guy, I love plants, sometimes I am in zonal denial. I don't know if you've ever
we
heard
like
that.
to push the limit on
We like to
things.
push that and try some zone 6 plants. And there's many a winter, as you know, that hasn't gone down
Right.
below
And
minus
then
10.
they'll be fine.
They'll be fine for a year or 2 years, but eventually it catches up.
Yeah.
And so most of what you do needs to really be in zone 5, 4, 3, in terms of the
Well,
zoning.
we've even found that there's plants that are zone 5 that we tried using here before, and they don't survive our winters.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. Yeah,
I think the Japanese sky pencil holly was one that we had tried at some
yeah,
point, and
yeah.
it,
And that was
it
one of
winter
those
burns.
5,
Yeah.
6, but man, it's when we get down that -20, it just knocks them out. Yeah, it just kills them. So, yeah, so that's another important thing.
I want to
go ahead.
interject on that
Sure.
real quick. So I think one lesson in that is from a contractor standpoint is in your plant warranty on your contract. I think it's really important to know what you're putting in, because you should omit that from if you're giving a plant warranty. Those kinds of things are things that you want to make sure are written out in your contract, because you could put in a plant like I can't remember what you just
Sky
said.
pencil
pencil
holly,
holly.
Yeah. So whatever, that could be a super expensive. I don't know how expensive it is, but if you're planning, say you plan in 20 of those and you have no idea what you're putting in, and then they all die. But if you didn't educate yourself or your customer, like, hey, we're gonna, if you know, maybe they requested that plant,
Right.
or they came to you with a picture from Pinterest, and
Right.
that's the picture what it is. Okay, we could put these in for you.
And the
But-
interesting thing is there are garden centers that will sell those plants.
Yes.
Okay, and will not tell you that they're marginally hard.
Exactly.
Right.
So
Great point.
So they may not be you may not be getting educated from your supplier that this plant may not make it, and so if you don't have someone that's educating you and you have something that you have no idea and maybe you've never used it before, I think it's important to be putting that stuff in your contract. As Mr. and Mrs. Smith, this is this plant and this plant are not going to be covered on our 1-year warranty or whatever you put in it, and this is why. It's because it's zoned this or that, and there's a chance that it may not make it or whatever. Like for us, I don't cover any boxwoods. I don't cover any roses. I have like a list of plants that I've had struggles with over the years.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm just not going to cover it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's a whole, we could talk about plant warranties for another hour,
Yeah.
but I don't really want to. But anyways, I just wanted to say that
Right.
if you're planting a one-off plant or something that they've requested that you've never used or whatever, I think it's important to make sure you're remembering that on your proposal.
That's an excellent point, because we'll have people who want us to special order stuff.
Yes.
And
Oh,
we know that it's not going to either perform or not be
Yes.
hardy in our area. I'm going to say, well, tell them that. They say, I still want to try it. It's no problem, but we can't warranty it.
That's right. Just
Absolutely.
communication and
just take your
managing
chance.
expectations.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
And it might be around for 5 or 7 years, and
Yeah.
they sell the house and move on.
That's
and
right.
So no big deal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. A few other things with plant functions, Dana, just things like, framing views.
Yes. Well, screening is another thing. If the customer's looking for privacy, if they're in, development and they need that screening, and
Yeah, let's talk about what happened during
Yeah.
COVID, because this was
Yeah, we talked about this before
crazy.
the episode, and this is crazy.
this is insane.
Yeah, and when we looked at our sales, suddenly we saw ourselves the first year of COVID. We kept ordering screening material, specifically emerald green arborvitae, because
Yes.
it's one of the
one of the most
cheaper,
popular.
unfortunately, one of the cheaper and not many choices for screening. There are certainly some other choices, but it was an easy one. It's an easy choice for screening. So we're selling out of emerald arborvitae. We're selling out of them like on a weekly.
Like, we can't keep the trucks coming in fast enough.
No. I'm looking at the sales record at the end of the year, and we have sold 3 to 4 times the number of emerald arborvitae.
Unbelievable.
It's like, why such a trend?
So
what
during
happened?
it, you didn't really think, you just
No.
like, wow, we're selling a lot of these. I guess we'll
Yeah.
just keep ordering
Well, I
those.
started to think about it a little bit, and we're thinking that people were home, and everyone that called us said, "Well, I need some privacy."
Well, and that was the feedback we kept getting. Almost like when I think lockdown started early in that spring, and it was like April, and we were just getting our first truckloads of trees in for the season.
yeah, it happened before the first
phones
truckload.
were literally ringing off the hook to the point where we couldn't even answer all the phone calls. Like, multiple lines are ringing at once, and I can't. It was unbelievable the amount of people calling just to get tree prices and to find out when they could come pick up the trees, because they needed screening right now. They're working from home, and
Everyone's working at home.
didn't wanna see
and
their
they didn't want to
neighbors.
see their neighbors.
And that's when you knew that COVID was like, we weren't going to all go out of business in the
Yeah.
landscaping industry.
Right.
That's true. Yeah.
Because
And
initially that was,
yeah.
everybody was freaking out.
The weird thing is, and these people have been in their homes sometimes for 5, 7, 10 years, they never realized that they could see their neighbor's house. And all of a sudden, now that they had spent time in their home, it's like, yeah, I don't want to look at this. I don't want to look at the playground equipment. I don't want to look at the neighbor's dog, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And the natural solution is emerald green Myers.
Well, and not only that, but people were spending more time at home because they had to, but now they're spending more time in their yard, and now they not only want screening, but they want to enjoy their yard now.
They do.
And so that really changed things for us as well. Like, people are living outside now. They're creating outdoor rooms, and they need everything. They want to buy annuals, and they want to buy pottery, and they want to they want the whole setup. And I mean, we couldn't even keep the greenhouse stocked at that time.
No, and everyone started vegetable gardening at that time too. The whole world, because the grocery stores were going to shut down, and they would have to basically live off the land, right?
And, everyone knows in the garden center that I, grow like a half-acre vegetable garden, and I can and all that. And so they're like, okay, Dana, just go in the greenhouse because everyone has questions about vegetables. So I would just stand in there on a Saturday and just answer questions about, like, how many tomato plants can I grow in a 12-inch pot? And I'm like, one. Because they're gonna grow their vegetable garden on their balcony of their apartment, and they're gonna live off the land there. And
I think some people walked out of here with a tray of tomatoes, and Dana looked at me and
I'm
said
like,
to the customer, like, that is enough to feed like your entire block with tomatoes.
They had no idea. So I'm just in there trying to educate as many people as I can, but it's like complete chaos.
Wow.
And I think what also changed that for us was that the box stores were like limiting the amount of people that could come in, and no one wanted to wait in line. So they were coming here like, well, we didn't want to wait in line at Home Depot, we're here to buy our vegetable plants.
Oh my! And we were doing all the precautions, and we were outside. We were,
but it's a different.
It was just a different environment.
It was a whole different crowd of people too. Like, they're not used to having help and being educated when they buy their plants. They're used to just buying it, figuring it out, and when it all dies, they go on vacation. And
so you had a huge opportunity there to not only grow the business, but grow your respect in the community, because you're actually taking the time to educate people.
That's true.
I mean, it was obviously complete chaos. I mean, I remember driving by here on any weekend, and it was like you had a going out of business sale or something. It was
That's how it felt.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah. And then to top it all off, and on the plus side of this, with all the bad things that happened with COVID, on the good side, there was a couple million new gardeners that entered into the industry. And, here we've lived it. We're passionate about it. We've been telling people about it. And it's like it was a wake-up call.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We want outdoor rooms. We want to enjoy our outside. We want to grow vegetables. We want to have pretty containers. So on the plus side, we've got this millions of new gardeners, which we said all along should be there.
Right.
Yeah, because what you experienced happened all over the country.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It did.
Everyone we knew in the industry was experiencing the same thing.
Right. And so then as a result, then you have all these people ordering triple, quadruple the amount of
Well,
plants
we started having obviously shortages in the industry, and it was getting hard for us to even get stuff. I'm ordering our annuals every week, and our growers were out.
They're out.
Out of vegetables. There weren't anymore. I mean, to the point where I was tapping into like second and third level suppliers who we order from sometimes, but I'm buying things from them that I don't normally buy, and racks of hanging baskets are coming in off the truck, and literally we couldn't even count them or get them priced before people were ripping them off the racks. They were literally helping us unload the trucks.
Oh my word.
I have never experienced anything like that in my life.
No. It was pretty crazy.
And would you say now it's evened out? Do you think that now that desire for the outdoor space and knowledge is still continuing? And obviously it's evened out, I'm sure. But I mean, do you feel like that has elevated everything?
Yeah, it has slowed down a little bit. But I just read an article. It was just as I was flying to Florida, actually. And they said, thankfully, that 70 to 80%, I think was something like the percentage, are still there because they've had a good experience. And so here's Raps, like it
They're
kind
like,
of
oh, wow,
summarizes
I
this
actually
whole
really
thing.
do like being outside. Or,
Yeah, I like being outside, and I got good advice, and my independent garden center, really they helped me out, and it's been a good experience. So 70-80% of those gardeners are still around. So yeah, I think the growth will continue, certainly not at that rate.
Yeah.
But hopefully we've retained this was the goal.
Yes,
It's
right.
not just make a quick buck. It was to
Right.
we've been here for 100 years.
Sure.
Now, you just woke up and it's like, yeah, we're part of your life, and it's so incredibly important. We'll talk about one trend that's coming up that's kind of relies on our industry. So,
Yes.
yeah, I mean it's alive, it's well, it's we're looking forward to the coming season for plants.
That's awesome.
So-
Wow.
You got her. I don't know. We had a few other different things here, just with our final things with planting design. We talked about climate control and putting a shade tree in.
Yeah.
And I think this is something kind of fun to address as well. If you're putting, first of all, a shade tree in, usually it's the southeast or the southwest side of your house. And just tell us a little bit about, like the most common mistake you and I see on it.
Well, one mistake that has stuck with me for several years is, I guess, I don't know if it was like someone started doing this, so everyone's doing it. So we have to plant the river birch on the corner of the house. But we all know river birch, they're huge and they grow fast. And to me,
get
they're
40,
messy.
50 feet tall.
They do.
You
And
know?
Super
so
messy.
you're planting it right on the corner of your house on your quarter-acre lot in your
Right.
small development. And, like, what's going to happen now in the next 5 to 10 years with this tree?
It's a nightmare.
I
It
actually
is.
had a landscaper, one of our customers, come in one day, and he was working on this project, and he's like, you have to see, I have pictures, you have to see this. He said, we're working at this house, and they planted a river birch, I think maybe like, I don't know, 5 feet or so off the
Oh,
corner of the
my
house.
word.
And it's approaching maturity now. And they had ripped all the landscaping out, and they were going to plant new landscaping. So he shows me pictures of this. The root system was so thick across the front of their foundation that you couldn't even plant in it.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it made me sick.
wow.
Like, I just,
Yes, I mean, you literally need to excavate
yeah.
the whole front of the
Like,
house
the tree needs to
get
come
that.
out
Yeah.
because now, to me, that's an issue for the foundation and for the home now because it's so close and now it's hanging on the house, on the roof, and it's
This all
destroying
goes
everything.
back to education too, and knowledge. If you know the tree is going to grow a fast growing tree, it's going to get 40, 50, 60 foot tall. It's going to have a 40-foot spread. You need to cut that in half, and it can't be any closer than probably 20 feet from the corner of the house.
Right.
So, that's one. We can still get scale with trees,
Well, yeah.
but we don't have to put them 5 foot from the house.
You can definitely still frame your house with trees, but plant the trees out into the lawn so that it frames your view from the street, but don't plant it like, 4 foot off the corner of the house.
Not to mention, it's an ultra messy tree.
Oh,
It
it is.
is,
Oh,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. But right plant, right place. This
That's
goes
right.
back to that
And
old adage
That's
of
definitely something you need to educate yourself
Yeah.
on if you're planting trees, for your customers.
I think just a few more thoughts on planting design is, would be the seasonality behind it. It's the fun story is I can go to visit a person's house, and let's say I'm at their house in May, and the whole yard's in bloom. I go back again in August, and there's not a single flower anywhere in the yard. And so many times I can tell, and I'll call the customer out and just say, you don't come in the garden center except in the springtime, do you?
Yeah.
Because they come in the garden center, they see all the stuff in bloom in the spring, and they pick everything out, and they fill their yard with spring blooming plants. So in planting design, this is so important for us to know seasonality. There are 4 seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, winter is almost 6 months long. Here, I shouldn't say winter, but the dormancy season
Yes.
is 6 months long. So something has to happen during that 6 months as well,
Right.
or it's just not as exciting.
Right.
So shopping the garden center 3 seasons out of the year, making sure you've got some winter interest as a designer, and not only as a designer but as an installer. I think that's so important on a
man.
contractor's behalf.
I can't stress the importance enough of making sure what you're using and how it's going to look in the winter and the dormant months, because it
Yes.
can look incredible.
Oh, yeah.
It can.
It really can. There's, you just don't have, not everything has to be chopped down to the ground.
Right.
No.
It's just, it can really be awesome if you think 12-month season and how that plant works.
I pull in my driveway right now, and things are dormant, but I have a lot of sustainable plants there. I've left perennials up with seed heads. I've left my grasses up. There's about 3 or 4 types of grasses. It's beautiful. I mean, they're amber color, We're not going to say they look dead.
Right.
No.
But not only does it block a little bit of the snow from coming onto my driveway, but the wind's blowing and there's movement. There's birds eating the seeds off of some of those plants, so there's life to it. Depending on the lighting, it casts a different hue on the colors and so forth. I mean, it's incredible.
Even some of the hydrangea flowers still
Totally.
look
they do.
amazing, and they hold snow really well when it snows. And
Yeah, we got a real soft snow the other day.
yeah, it
was just a
does.
little
Right now,
catch.
everything looks awesome.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, it really is. So that is so, so important.
It is.
Some of the other things we still consider are things like, of course, we want to complement the house style. Dana, talk a little bit about like how we layer
Well,
plants.
layering is so important, and I think that maybe sometimes, if there's not enough knowledge, it gets lost. But you have to think about the canopy, the understory, and the ground plane of the design. Not just what shrubs are going to go in, but you need trees and you need things for scale, and sometimes it depends on maintenance level. But I think that it's important to get that perennial layer, the ground covers in there, so it's a really well thought out plan, and you have all those elements combined together, because I think that it gets kind of boring and kind of plain when you just have your row of shrubs across the front of the house. And I think in college we kind of use that term like Velcro plants.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, we got like a nice little soldier row of shrubs, and that was it.
Yep.
That's where they stopped. So
Yep. And sometimes, just a side on all the stuff, like sometimes you just have to do what the client wants or what their
for sure.
budget.
That's true.
Sometimes it's like, well, this is what they want, so whatever.
Yes.
There's times that I do jobs and I'm like, I don't like that, but that's
I've
what
done
we're
it
doing
too.
it.
For sure.
No, you bring up a good point.
That's a psychology thing too. Sometimes
is.
you just got to give them what they want.
Yeah, and sometimes it's your mind thing for yourself
Yes,
rather than
you
I
have to
think-
let go and remember
At
you don't live
least-
there.
At least I feel good presenting the proper way, or like a well thought out plan, but
Yes.
then what they decide to do with it from there is on them.
Yes.
But at least I did what I thought I should do,
That's right. And sometimes I think as a contractor, I think it's easy to look at other people's jobs and be like, wow, I can't believe they did that. Sometimes you need to put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah.
They may not have had an option.
Right.
And maybe they were told they need to do that.
Yeah.
That goes with life in general, judging people, I guess. But you can judge other contractors' landscapes
Yes.
sometimes, and you don't know anything of what happened to get to that landscape. And the client may think that's amazing, and that's what they wanted.
Yes.
Right? So
Right.
No, that's a very valid point. That's
Yep.
for sure.
just because I've done jobs and I left, I'm not going to share that I did that. But whatever. That's what they wanted. I got paid,
And they were happy, so that's all that
and
matters.
everybody,
that's part of the reality.
That's
It
right.
is.
It is
It
real
is.
life. That's real
Real
life
life.
lessons.
Yeah, you got her. Just a couple other principles I think we speak of in planning design. One thing is this focal point or dominant thing.
Yes.
People come in and they just want one of everything. And it's a little bit, I don't know, what would you call it in design?
Well,
when
I
we're-
always say it looks a little circusy, but
Yeah,
it's just,
circusy.
There's no consistency or no flow in it. And like when you look at someone's front of their house and then they've done that, it's like your eye is just all over the place. It doesn't flow at all.
So talk a little bit about the repetition thing, which is like
Well,
fundamental in design.
Yeah, repetition is so important. And I always try to, sometimes the client doesn't want to do that, but repeat elements of that landscape. Like even if it's from the front yard into the backyard too, and you're creating this flow, but you kind of repeat the same plant, like not just one plant, but groupings of plants.
Yes.
And it depends on the scale of the project too, and the size of the home or the business. But I think it's important to repeat that and get it across the whole front, or if you're building beds or whatever you're doing. But it just really like draws your eye across the project, and it repeats colors and textures and just forms. And even in the wintertime, if you're only going to plant one evergreen tree, and in the wintertime, that's what you have. You have one. So it's important to repeat things, I think, and to create that flow.
And it's not always the same plant. Like you mentioned,
No.
it could be the same texture or
Yes.
shape or size of a plant that you're repeating in groups.
Correct.
And talk a little bit about grouping, what
Well, and
we
grouping,
typically-
we always plan odd numbers, and that's honestly a design rule, I guess.
Yeah.
They teach that in landscape design. I learned that in floral design, but you always plant in odd numbers, because if you think about it and you're planting just in even numbers, you would plant 2 of something and you look at it, your eye splits between the 2. But if you have a group of 3, your eye just sees this group. It doesn't like split your vision as you're looking at a project. So we always plan in odd numbers. Obviously, a smaller project, I'm doing groupings of 3, 5, 7. But when you're moving on to, say, a homeowner with like a large scale project or even a commercial project, your groupings, you're not going to plant a group of 3 of plants across the whole
more mass
project.
planting.
Yeah. You need more mass planting, and not necessarily saying that you should plant all of the same type of plant, but your groupings definitely need to increase. So you're planting in, numbers greater than 11.
Yeah.
On a lot
and
of
once we
projects.
surpass like 11, it doesn't matter if there's 12 or 13.
No,
yeah, because you won't pick
15.
that up.
You're
You're not going to pick that up.
Right.
Yeah.
Speaking of the planting in, or what you were talking, Dana, what you were talking about with the repetition, something that brought to mind in a real world application for us, and the story, is we had a client last year that they wanted to add a certain type of plant in their landscape. After we did the design, they asked for a specific type of plant that they wanted in their landscape, and we didn't have this plant in their landscape at all. And so because of that, they wanted it more in the backyard. And because of that, then we kind of brought it around through the landscape, around the whole house.
Yes.
And all over the place, so that when you walk around, it all makes sense.
Right.
It like her idea of, I want this plant in this space. Yeah, that's fine. We can give you that plant.
Right.
But then we compromised on the design, because we knew if we want to just throw this one plant, from a design standpoint, it was going to be a little weird to just have this grouping of 5 or 7 of this plant. Now let's put it in the rest of the landscape, because then it will make more sense.
Right. Well, and it gives you a nice flow, because you weren't just viewing only the backyard. There was areas of the property where you can see multiple different areas that were landscaped. So if you're going to have that specific color, that specific texture there, you want to see it other places and repeat it.
That's right. And so I think it's important from a client contractor relationship, is if somebody wants something that maybe you don't want, or that you didn't think of, or you didn't see in the design, if they want that, you can still compromise and put that in other parts of the landscape, so that it still looks good from a design standpoint and gets them what they want.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's all about making them happy. I mean,
it's a win-win situation.
That's right. And you have to do
Yep.
that as a contractor. And I mean, you need to maintain that relationship, and that's just part of it. So
yeah.
So those are just a few of the fundamental principles: the dominance, the scale, repetition. Certainly, we're not going into super great detail. There's a lot more to it. But let's kind of conclude maybe with some of the plant choices. I think not only in the garden center, but possibly in the contracting world, people want something new or trendy. And my whole thing is that there's not... Like every plant that's introduced doesn't have like a set of trials, or it hasn't been tested for 5 years or 2 years or 1 year, possibly not even at all. It hasn't been tested in different parts of the country. It hasn't been tested in different soil types. That's not always the case. Some plants have been around for a while and have been tested, things like that. But
how is there a standardization of that? Like if you want to bring
not that I'm aware of.
No,
so
I don't
if
think there are any rules
you
for
want to
that.
bring a plant to the market, what is, you just create this, so and so new plant. I don't know how that works. I mean, that's probably
that's another totally different
topic,
podcast.
yeah.
Right. So for time's sake, a plant is designed or created, or changed or whatever. If somebody wants to bring it to market, they can, and you can just buy it from them?
It is a long process, especially if they're getting it patented, things like that. So that process is a long process, but there's not a set rules.
Okay. There's no guidelines like you must try this plant out for 5 years before you can sell it to people.
It has to be unique and different.
Okay.
So that plant can't be one of the same plants that's already out there that's being named. So those rules are strict.
And whatever it takes to get them to make it change,
Yeah.
then it's okay.
So if it's a different leaf color, it could even be a different like flower height. It could be a different plant. Like in the hosta world, there's 10,000 plus named cultivars of hostas. So
Sure.
it might be same variegation, but this one's 12 inches tall and the next one's 18 inches tall.
Right.
So that might be the difference.
Right.
But no, in terms of the testing, so what we look at a little bit, I like to think of genetics. You know, like your children are going to be good kids because you're a hard worker, you're motivated, and so forth.
Lord willing.
But is that 100%?
No.
Okay.
Right.
So
It's not.
just because there's good parents doesn't necessarily mean the offspring
That's
are
a
going to
very
be
good analogy.
Yes.
going to be
Very good.
100%. But we can look at things like where did it come from, what
Okay.
parents did it come from, and say, yeah, we got a good chance that this is going to be a good plant.
So you guys
know.
are doing this?
Yes.
Well, we look at some stuff like
When you're trying something new,
Right.
you're
Yeah.
looking where it came from.
we look at the Latin name, we look at the scientific name,
And then
because
we start looking it up, and sometimes we'll try to see like what plant breeder did it come from, or like what part of the country is it being
Yeah.
bred in, you know. And
Yeah.
sometimes we can see these plants in the trial gardens. Like we'll visit different trials and
Yeah.
see these plants.
Okay.
Let's give you an example of like a coral bell. Heuchera villosa is the Latin name of a coral bell. And that Heuchera villosa is the species, there's other species of heucheras or coral bells, but that particular one does really well in our area. So it can take the heat and humidity of summertime. So we know if that's one of the parents, there's a good chance that that particular one will work here. Now it could be yellow leaves, could be orange, could be green leaves, could be a red leaf one. But if we see that Heuchera villosa blood in it, say, yeah, let's give that one a try.
Sure.
Because we've had a lot of Heucheras that have not done well, again, because it's a different genetic makeup.
Yeah.
So that gives you kind of a general example
Yeah.
of that. So new is not always better. Great to check a local source.
Yeah.
We have killed plenty of plants.
Yeah.
You know, so that way when you come in and say, hey, I do want this client that wants low maintenance, that wants tried and true plants, we're going to give you this certain list of plants.
Right.
You say, hey, we're willing to be a little adventuresome. We'll say, hey, let's try a few of these. And you say, I've got this client who just has to have something new and exciting. Say, you know what, this just came in. We don't really know anything about it. We think it's good parents. Give it a shot.
Yeah.
You know,
I think
so-
that's another reason that keeps me coming back here is I know the work you guys are putting in to be a quality supplier. You're thinking about where things are. You're not just ordering just because it looks cool in a picture.
Yeah.
And another reason why I continue to have you doing my designs is because you're not you're hearing a million other people telling you what something potentially has done or is doing,
Right.
whereas I don't. And so then you're like, you know what? I know that plant would be cool, but last week two people told us that they did this or that or whatever. Like
Yeah.
Right.
you have so much information and coming from different sources that I don't have access to. And so that is, again, another benefit of me working with you as a contractor, or those any of you listening that find something like this, because they're out there. You just have to seek it out. And this is the value you're going to be getting than just going to a major wholesaler just because the plant price is cheaper.
Right.
Absolutely.
I'm getting so much more than just the plant design by paying someone to work with somebody like this. So
Yeah,
That's a side story,
Yeah,
but
I mean,
I'm
there's
just saying.
No, but that's a lot of value to it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you come to us and you're paying just a little bit more, you're paying also for a little bit of insurance.
100%.
You know, so you really are.
Yeah.
So I
And
mean,
knowledge that I
Years
don't
of
otherwise.
experience, yeah.
I don't
Right.
have access to otherwise.
And that's part of why we travel and so forth too.
Oh, it
So we
is.
see it. We see it in different circumstances. We go to people's yards.
Mm-hmm.
Dana, I won't speak totally for Dana, but I know when I'm driving around in town, I'm looking at everyone's landscape.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah.
So I
do.
got to keep a little bit better eye on the road.
That's
But
true.
Sure, right.
I'm looking to see what it looks like here, what it looks like by the dunes, what it
Yeah.
looks like in Valpo. Whenever I see those plants, sometimes I'll send her a picture. Say,
Yeah.
do you remember when we planted this? This is not doing so well.
Oh, yeah.
What's your intake on?
Yeah.
What's your input on
Yeah.
that, and why
Oh, yeah, we
why
both
it's
do
not?
that.
So, yeah, we're living it, breathing it,
Yeah.
loving it.
We're total plant nerds.
We are. we are. And then there's this case, too, with a lot of overused stuff. Some stuff is overused, and then there's this invasive plant issue. There is some regulation in the state of Indiana, and there are plants on that list. But I think two examples of plants that are not on that list yet in Indiana.
Well, definitely the flowering pear tree, which is everyone's favorite parkway
Everyone's
tree.
beautiful.
Everyone.
And it just got to stop.
It's a terrible tree, honestly.
Yeah.
First of all, it seeds around and it's taking over all of the native areas.
Native areas
But
and natural areas.
I remember at Purdue, like when I was first learning all of my trees, I'm like, this plant stinks.
Yeah.
It flowers in the spring and it stinks.
It smells.
It actually smells
It
bad.
does.
It does.
It's weak and it's not long lived. So I mean,
Yeah. So
But you
you'll
drive
never-
around, you drive down neighborhoods, and they're just lined with them.
oh yeah.
yeah, and so even though people are not, it's not against the state regulation to plant a pear, we have to be stewards of the
Right,
environment and
right.
say, just don't do it.
Yeah.
If there's another possibility, burning bush is another one that we've seen especially in natural areas and woodland areas where
Yes.
people planted them, where a designer or a contractor has put them around somebody's house, and now their 30 acres of woods is populated by burning bush because it's seeded around.
It's crazy to think, like, in my career, where I used to work, we did a lot of commercial landscape.
Sure.
A lot. And mostly like fast food restaurants and different things. And it was like Aspirea, Daylily, and burning bush. And the amount of burning bush we planted,
Yeah.
I mean, just
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And now, this is a huge problem.
Yeah, so again, we have to be aware of that and have to educate people about it, and even though it's not against regulation. So this kind of brings us to, I think, our final thought here with trends, and I see as huge trends, things like diversity, natives, nativars, environmentally friendly landscapes, and plant material being used. Diversity, if we define that it's using, instead of having a big commercial site that you're working on and you've got 50 trees, they're not all red sunset maples.
Right.
You're going to take it, and even towns are making regulations where they're taking this and saying you've got to use at least 3 different genera of plant. You might have to use an oak, honey locust, and a maple on this job site. So diversity is key.
Yeah.
We all just experienced this with emerald ash borer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And ash was I hate having it gone from the palette.
Yeah. It's a great tree.
Yeah, there was white ash, there was blue ash, there was green ash, and there was a lot of different cultivars available, and it was rugged.
Yeah.
I mean, it could take salt, it could take, all these terrible environmental conditions. So we miss our ash trees, but when they were planted in such huge numbers, and again, this all goes back to, cloning and things like that. So they're genetically similar. So most of the plants were lost due to, in this case, a boring insect, but it can be a disease, it can be anything else. So diversity is key.
Yeah.
So the point there is we want to plant as many species. We're still doing some of that grouping.
Right.
We're still not going to violate all the rules, but if we got 50, we can make 3 groups of 15 and another group of 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or something like that. So we can still make that work.
A really good example, going back to the what was it? The I don't know, like plants where you think it's going to be okay and it ends up not, like the chokeberry.
Yeah.
It's something that in my career, it's something that I've learned where they create this plant. They think it's going to be a phenomenal, small shrub. It has a nice flower in the spring.
It's a cultivar of a native plant, so
it looks awesome.
it has good parents.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, within 2 years, it's like it's a nightmare.
Taking over an entire landscape bed.
Yeah, and it's like creeping underneath the mulch everywhere, and like you try and
the
remove
runners are insane.
It's just and that is a perfect example of you thought something was going to be something and it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
then
you learn.
We learn that quickly, and then
yeah.
say, okay, the first year we sold 500, now we sell 50.
Yeah.
But we sell it for a specific purpose.
Right.
You want to stabilize a slope. You want to naturalize an area.
It would be amazing for
It's-
stabilizing
Oh yeah,
the slope.
planting
there's your
it in
perfect
restriction with concrete curbs or something.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yes. So
It's just those are the things that you need to be learning as a contractor and as a designer is learning, watching what you're putting in, and listening to the calls or complaints that could be coming in.
The best way to learn that, honestly, is go back and revisit those projects.
Yes.
Year 2, 3, 4, 5. Go
Yep.
back, drive by, see what worked and what didn't.
Yep.
There's so many contractors who never go back to their projects. They do for the warranty period,
Yeah.
the first year,
Right.
and take care of stuff. But many times they're not revisiting it.
Right.
Revisiting it in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years.
Right. I also would say this is kind of just something I just thought of is with the chokeberry thing is I remember the first year we started using them on our designs, and then I planted some at my house, and I noticed them at my house first. The way that it was like coming out of the mulch and it was like creeping all over the place, and I'm like, what is going on here? And I'm like, oh, this is kind of a nightmare. And then we go to a job and I see the same thing over there. And then I ask you about it and you're like, yeah, we've started to notice some of that stuff coming up. This is not what we thought it was going to be. And so I would say if you have the ability to, and you want to try and use some new plants or something, try them at your own house for a year or two. If
We do that all the time.
Right. I know you do, but
my home's a classroom, man.
Right. And so I think if you have the ability to, and you could try and do something that this is what makes us, people that care about the industry. And not everybody's going to care this much, but I know I do. I know you do. And that's one of the best ways, I think, to further yourself in this industry is to actually care enough to try some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And another way you're providing value to your client that they may not understand is the lengths you're going to provide them with a quality landscape.
Yep.
So I just think that's a really good side point is doing some of this stuff yourself. And it's much cheaper for you to fail at your own house
It is.
than it is at somebody else's.
Oh,
or
yes.
say you go plant 50 of them and all of a sudden you have a big issue and that can cost you thousands of dollars.
You're
Yeah.
right.
So, and a potentially a hurt relationship with your customer.
Well, I was going to say
There
the
you
other
go.
thing is, your reputation, and just knowing that before you walk into a meeting with your client, and they are confident in you that you have the experience to know those things too.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, let me just wrap up with those couple final trends. We go to conferences, as we said, we like to travel, and gentleman Doug Tallamy is real big on like wildlife ecology, and we heard him speak. And, he's super big on just planting not only diversity, but also a lot of natives and a lot of things that benefit wildlife. The world works together. It's not just the wildlife and the trees and the humans. We're all interconnected, and I think that's kind of his premise behind it. So he's encouraging us to plant things that are super wildlife friendly, things in the categories of like oaks and birch and even crab apples, which provide a lot of food and help that network as well. Maple trees, different things on the perennial side like
We have goldenrod and asters. There's sunflowers, Joe pieweed, sedge.
yeah, and the sunflower is the helianthus
Those- I love
category.
those.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the helianthus, and again, you can just see sometimes we go in a landscape and the wildlife is covering it. But I don't want to discount our cultivated stuff as well. And there's a lot of called nativars or cultivated varieties of native plants. So even like our hydrangea category, we love hydrangea arborescens.
Yes.
And again, knowing a little bit of Latin helps us understand it, but that comes from our native one. But things like Incredible Blush,
Yes.
in that
Open Smile
arborescens series. Quercifolia types, which are the oak leaf types. So those are some of our favorites to use in the landscape as well. There are some of our non-natives like the panicle type hydrangeas, huge category.
Yeah.
It's rare that we design a landscape without
Without them.
Yeah.
some type of hydrangea.
Yeah.
Well, and they're
know?
they're so great because they honestly are pretty low maintenance.
They are.
Yeah, they are.
They
The
are.
color and the impact they give is so huge.
In the beginning of this, we said winter interest was some
Oh,
of those
yeah.
as well. And there's also
Incredible.
some pollinator-friendly panicle types like the little quickfire that
Yeah.
have the sterile and the fertile flowers.
Yeah.
So we can get the best of both worlds. We can get that low maintenance in. That's kind of,
Attract the bees.
we got
and-
that seasonality
Yeah.
in. So it kind of like, that's one of those plants that just fits our discussion for today and
Right.
so forth. You had mentioned the chokeberry, and yeah, there's some issues, but there are some of the older chokeberries that are still super environmentally friendly.
Right.
Things like that, Dervilla, Weigela, we do like a lot of the different Weigelas. There's a lot of different sizes and colorful foliages.
Yeah, the breeding has been good on those.
Yeah,
things.
and the flowers I think are very attractive to pollinators as well. And it's of course happening in the springtime. Shrub roses, yeah, there's a lot of different avenues in the shrub rose category. don't always think, you brought up the point earlier, don't always think that something is necessarily going to last us 20 or 25 years.
Right.
Our trees should last us a long time in landscape design. Our shrubs, we're going to change them out in our lifetime once or twice. I like to say analyze every 7 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Certainly every 10 to 12.
Yeah.
My point there being is like, have you ever bought a new vehicle? Like,
Right.
or do you wait 30 years to buy a new vehicle?
Right.
Do you change the colors of your house? Do you change the carpet of your house? You know, so yeah, your landscape has to be changed occasionally too.
Yeah.
And when it comes down to things like the perennial layer, certainly the annuals could be changed out every year, of course, but perennials are even, you know, something that you don't necessarily expect to have your entire life. There's a few of those traditional ones. You might have a peony or a hosta that you was passed down from your grandmother or your mother or something like that. But, you know, perennials change out, you know, change them out every 3 to 5 years. Certain things you don't like the look, they've spread too much, they haven't performed, you know, so that concept as well, that shrub roses are in that same category. You know, that you enjoy them because they have a lot of seasonality, there's a lot of months of bloom, but when they start to look bad, don't be afraid to go in there and dig it out and put a different variety or cultivar in, things like that.
I think that's a good thing I probably don't do near as good enough maybe educating my customers on the longevity of a landscape and or if some people just don't care, but I'm just saying, like, if they care, and you'll figure that out,
for sure,
is talking about that. I think that's a good stuff to talk to your customers about.
Yeah, they expect your sidewalks and your hardscapes to last. What would you say? What would you say your longevity of a patio or a retaining wall should be?
I mean, a long time. If it's built correctly, depending on the product too. I mean, if there's some products that you could install in 5 years, they're pitting or they're showing their aggregate or stuff. But some of the stuff we're putting in now, it should last 10 plus years minimum.
You got it.
And really, I look forward to the day that I can go back and see projects that I've put in that are 10 plus years old.
Yep.
We're starting our 9th year this year, and it's like, how does something look that I put in my first year?
Yeah.
Now, we made mistakes. There's things that I've done that I wouldn't do now, and especially my first couple of years. But I'm really excited in the next 5 years, your 10 to 15 year projects, and seeing how they look, how the landscape looks, and what would I not do now that we did then?
Sure.
Right.
Because even from a design standpoint, you're like, I can't believe I would have done that. You know, I mean, that's we're evolving and getting better, and that you want to do that.
Part of the journey, right? It's you evolve.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of the journey. But the interesting thing, your sidewalk looks pretty well the same. I mean, it's going to have aged a little bit or so forth.
Of course.
Now that plant that you put in 10 years ago is going to have grown multiple times, multiple sizes, and has changed. So, there's that huge difference. So when we say it's not because of poor landscape design necessarily, it could be lack of maintenance that would change a landscape in 7 to 10 years. And it could just simply be that we're tired of it. It has gotten just slightly too big, or it's not performing properly or something like that. So because it is constantly changing, the material that we're dealing with in planting design, that's the reason for the review. It doesn't mean that every landscape has to be torn out every 7 to 10 years. No. It just simply has to be reevaluated.
Exactly.
Right.
That's all.
They don't ever tell you on a plant, like, we expect 15 to 20 year life expectancy, right? I mean, there's not.
I would say there's plants that are listed as short-lived.
Yeah, for sure.
Are they?
Yeah.
Like on the tag or whatever? Or not really?
I don't think they're really telling you that.
Nobody would actually say that.
No,
yeah.
I was just curious.
Well, again, you're taking a plant, putting it all over different places.
Yeah,
in the
how
country.
could they actually do that?
So down south, it's probably going to live 20 years. Up here, it might live 5.
Right. And like by us, I mean, you could plant something in the clay soils, or I could plant something in a sandy, well-draining soil, and in 2 years, the two different plants can look completely different.
Completely different.
Right.
And grow at different rates.
I mean, when we plant in sand and amend the soils and do that, like in 1 year, perennials look like they've been there for 5 years. It's unbelievable.
Versus a heavy clay,
unmodified soil. Unbelievable.
It also Is it on irrigation or is it
Yes.
being watered? Or
Huge
is it
difference.
just out there left
Right.
to survive on
Right.
its own? Yeah.
Right. And then they give plants a size, but you put them under perfect conditions, and that 5-foot
man.
plant suddenly could be 7 or 8 foot.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. And I know that from personal experience
Yeah.
because I have sandy loam and here we have clay. And so I'll take things home and plant them. And it's like, okay, well, this definitely does not do the same thing, around here that it does at my house. So
Yeah.
I kind of learned that.
To contrast that, in my unamended clay, I can have a 3-foot plant that can stay 3 foot for 10 years.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like,
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
But it can still grow.
Oh, Right.
It's just
It's
not
alive, it looks good.
thriving.
And
It's
say
just
it might
not
not be
thriving.
thriving, but it's living.
Yes,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
wild. Well, there's lots to think about when you're designing a landscape and working with plants. And I think that's what keeps us all coming back is the constant change that we're all experiencing always. Wayne is always super inspiring to me because you always want to keep learning and you're still
Always.
excited about the industry.
Love it.
I think we all get burned out on the day-to-day or, dealing with customers.
12, 14, 16-hour
Yeah.
days get a little long once in a while.
And, but the root of what keeps us coming back, I think, seeing you be in the industry for so long and you working with him so long and how you guys work together, I think all that should be really inspiring to people in this industry. It is always changing and you can always be better, right?
Yeah.
Always.
Always.
So,
And it's a lot of fun. It's a great journey.
It is.
And it's great to see people up and coming and
Yeah.
continuing to learn with the same passion. And
absolutely.
I feel like the father or grandfather to the two of you.
Probably lots of people that we work with every day.
But to see that it's alive and well, and you guys have the right attitude, and Andy, again, your company is pretty incredible and progressive, and
Thank you.
I'm always excited. I know Dana's excited to work with companies like yourself, and it's a challenge for us.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
great.
wonderful.
Why don't you, if you guys have any closing thoughts, and then if you want to plug Niemeyer's, and Dana also runs the social media, correct?
Yes,
for
I do.
Niemeyer's, so
Uh-huh.
she does all the Instagram and Facebook, and
Yep.
and so whatever you want to talk about as far as where you're working, what you're doing, where to find you guys.
Let's talk about our new venture
Well,
on the
that's what
corner.
I was just going to say.
Yeah.
We are starting we have the garden center, but we're actually building a new garden center over on the corner of our property. So
Yeah, we got about a 7,000 square foot greenhouse. Jessica Niemeyer is kind of heading this project and really doing a great job.
How big is your current greenhouse?
We've got about 3,000 square feet, so we'll more than double it.
Yeah.
And it's just a nicer facility. It's just going to be a really nice, presentable facility that we're going to do a lot of change outs in. We're going to try to group plants a little differently so that when people come in, they have their annual and tropical and container areas. They're going to have maybe some native areas. They're going to have some, some of our favorites,
a lot of cool
things like
things in
that.
the works. Yeah.
Yeah, so we don't expect to probably be in until probably fall or possibly even for the container seminars winter because there's delays with
Yeah.
everything.
Construction. Yeah.
But
Right.
so that new garden center, but it'll be fun to watch it happen.
It
And
will.
again,
Yeah,
Dana's
and
posting it on social
Yeah,
media.
we post all the time on social media updates on our Instagram, Facebook.
And what is that handle for?
It's Niemeyer Landscape on there and Facebook too. Niemeyer Landscape Supply.
And tell them a little bit, so I don't want to talk about
So
myself.
I was
going to
say, you also want to check out Wednesdays with Wayne.
Yeah.
So we record, Wednesdays with Wayne, and we post every Wednesday. We have our YouTube channel as well, Niemeyer's Landscape Supply on there, and so every Wednesday we have Wednesdays with Wayne. So you get to hear words of wisdom with Wayne. He's, doing everything from
so
visiting.
you could have called it Words of Wisdom.
We
with
could.
Wayne.
We
Yeah,
could have.
could have done that.
Never
But
thought about that.
He just does a variety of topics in the horticulture industry, from visiting literally like a customer's backyard to visiting Vizcaya, gardens and where were you just
In
at?
Florida, Miami,
Florida.
yeah.
I mean, he's all over the place. So wherever
so
we
cool.
go, either I'm recording him or he finds someone that he's traveling with to record him. So you get to kind of go along with him and experience a lot of different things in this industry.
Yeah, you've
so.
visited job sites
Yes.
and job sites
Yep.
that are completed versus literally in
Like
the process.
under
Yes.
construction. We
Yep.
visited, your big project
Yep.
over the season and talked about the plants and the project itself. But
Yep.
So
Yeah, so
that's
that's kind of things that are happening here.
Yeah.
We're excited about the coming season.
Yeah.
Dana's is very involved in the garden center. Excited about some of the new design aspects and working with the contractors again. This is the time of the year we're recharged.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Right.
we're pretty excited at this time
Right.
of the
Yeah.
year.
Pretty soon it's go time.
Ready
Oh,
to
yeah.
go.
Right.
But it's been an amazing journey for us both. And the Niemeyer's adventure is fantastic. They're very good people, good quality stock, and
Yep.
just nice people to work for.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's great.
It's been great.
Good deal. Well, I appreciate you both being here today. I hope this was a wealth of knowledge for people, or wealth of information for people listening. And a big shout out to Niemeyer's for sponsoring this episode and also allowing us to record here, right here in their what would you call this? Your conference room?
Yeah.
Not really.
Lunchroom,
Yeah.
conference
Yeah,
room,
right.
multi-purpose
So,
room.
it's been a great place to have to
Yeah.
host this, and you can be sure to give them a follow on Instagram and check out the things that they're doing. So, thanks to Niemeyer's, and thanks to Albany's Candy Factory for being the official candy of the Mulder Life podcast. And we will see you guys on the next one. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.